The first warning came not with a bang, but with a whisper of static across global communication networks. It was 3:47 hours UTC when the first anomalous signal breached Earth's outer sensor arrays, a momentary distortion that most would have dismissed as a technical glitch. Dr. Samira Khan, lead astronomer at the International Space Monitoring Center in Geneva, knew better. Her fingers flew across holographic displays, triangulating the signal's origin. The data was unprecedented. Whatever had crossed their solar system's boundary was massive, moving at speeds that defied conventional physics. Director Rodriguez, she called into her comlink, her voice steady despite the growing tension. We have an incoming unidentified object. Correction. Objects. 3,000 kilometers above the Pacific Ocean, the first Zalarian scout ships materialized like phantoms against the star-studded backdrop. Their design was nothing like humanity's understanding of spacecraft, organic yet mechanical, with curves that seemed to shift and breathe, hull materials that absorbed and redistributed energy in ways human engineers could barely comprehend. Inside the United Nations Emergency Command Center, a collective intake of breath punctuated the silence. Holographic displays flickered with incoming data streams, satellite feeds, military tracking systems, and civilian communication networks all converging on a single terrifying reality. First contact was happening, and humanity was woefully unprepared. The Zalarian ships moved with a precision that suggested more than mere technological superiority. Each vessel seemed to breathe with a collective intelligence, their movements synchronized like a school of predatory fish. They didn't attack immediately. Instead, they studied, probed, analyzed. General Michael Chen, head of the Global Defense Initiative, studied the tactical displays with a growing sense of dread. "They're mapping our defenses," he muttered to his second-in-command. "Look how they're positioning themselves, not to attack, but to understand." Across the world, initial reactions were predictably human. Social media exploded with conspiracy theories, live streams, and panic. Government communication channels buzzed with encrypted transmissions. Military bases went to maximum alert, weapons systems primed but uncertain. The Zalarian Collective, observing through their advanced sensory networks, found humanity's chaos amusing. Their neural-linked intelligence processed human behavior like an anthropologist studying a primitive tribe. Divided nations, competing ideologies, technological disparity between regions. To the Zalarians, Earth looked like a fractured, easy conquest. What they couldn't understand was the spark that lived beneath humanity's apparent weakness, the same force that had driven humans to explore, to survive, to push beyond impossible boundaries. In a small research station in the Andes, Dr. Elena Rodriguez looked up from her quantum entanglement research, a strange smile playing on her lips. Something was coming, something that would change everything. The first communication from the Zalarian ships came precisely at 6:12 hours UTC. No words, no language, just a pure mathematical transmission that cut through every communication network on the planet. A message, both an introduction and a declaration. We are the collective. Your world is now our territory. Humanity's response would define the fate of not just one planet, but potentially the entire known universe. The first wave struck Tokyo at precisely 800 local time. Massive crystalline ships descended through the morning mist, their energy signatures unlike anything humanity had ever encountered. The initial bombardment was clinical, almost surgical. Entire city blocks vaporized in silent, devastating pulses of energy that left nothing but superheated air and disintegrated matter. Japanese Defense Force Commander Hiroshi Tanaka watched in horror as sophisticated missile defense systems became nothing more than melted scrap. Modern military technology, the pride of decades of technological innovation, crumbled like wet paper against the Zalarian assault. Simultaneously, similar attacks hit major population centers across the globe. New York, London, Moscow, Beijing. No major city was spared. The Zalarian strategy was clear. break human resistance by destroying communication infrastructure and governmental centers in a single devastating strike. In the United Nations Emergency Command Center, the scene was controlled chaos. Holographic displays showed real-time devastation across continents. Military commanders from different nations, who hours ago might have been bitter rivals, now worked shoulder to shoulder. "Shanghai is gone," a Chinese general reported, his voice barely above a whisper. Estimated casualties in the millions. General Michael Chen, coordinating the global response, felt the weight of humanity's survival on his shoulders. The initial military response was fragmented and ineffective. Traditional warfare doctrine collapsed within minutes of the Zalarian attack. Jet fighters disintegrated before they could even launch a counterattack. Naval fleets became floating targets, their most advanced weapon systems rendered useless. But something unexpected began to happen. As the initial shock wore off, humanity's true nature emerged. Social media, despite massive infrastructure damage, became an impromptu intelligence network. Surviving military and civilian communication systems began to adapt. Where traditional command structures failed, grassroots coordination began to take shape. In Mumbai, a group of software engineers repurposed cloud computing networks into a distributed defense system. In Silicon Valley, tech companies abandoned product development to focus on technological countermeasures. Universities worldwide shifted entire research programs to understand and combat the alien threat. Dr. Elena Rodriguez, watching from her research station in the Andes, recognized the pattern emerging. The Zalarians expected a centralized hierarchical response. Instead, they were facing a hydra, a network that could adapt, reshape, and respond from multiple unpredictable directions. "They don't understand us," she muttered to her colleague. "They see our differences as weakness, but it's our greatest strength." The invasion entered its second day. Major cities lay in ruins. Governments seemed paralyzed. To any external observer, humanity appeared defeated. The Zalarian collective began preparing for the next phase of their conquest, confident in their technological superiority. They did not yet understand that they had awoken something far more dangerous than a simple military force. They had united a species. In makeshift command centers, underground bunkers, and improvised communication networks, humanity was already beginning to fight back. Not with traditional weapons, but with something far more powerful, an unprecedented spirit of cooperation, creativity, and defiance. The underground research facility beneath the Atacama Desert was humanity's last hope. Dr. Elena Rodriguez stood before a holographic display, her fingers tracing quantum entanglement patterns that seemed to dance with impossible complexity. Beside her, General Michael Chen watched with a mixture of hope and exhaustion. "The Zalarian neural network," Elena explained, her voice cutting through the tension, "is both their greatest strength and their most critical vulnerability." She pulled up a series of complex diagrams showing the alien collective's communication infrastructure. Unlike human networks that relied on discrete communication channels, the Zalarian system was a living, breathing neural matrix. Each ship, each individual was connected through a hyper-advanced quantum communication network that allowed instantaneous information sharing and collective decision-making. "They think as one," Chen observed, "but that means they also fail as one." The breakthrough had come from an unlikely intersection of disciplines. A team of neuroscientists from Cape Town, quantum physicists from Beijing, and network engineers from Silicon Valley had been working remotely, sharing data through cobbled-together communication networks that survived the initial invasion. Dr. Aisha Okonkwo, a Nigerian neurotechnologist, had first noticed the pattern. The Zalarian neural network operated on principles of absolute conformity. Every decision, every action was a collective consensus. This made them incredibly efficient, but also exponentially more vulnerable to systemic disruption. "It's like a massive, galaxy-wide hive mind," Aisha had explained during their last encrypted conference call. "But a hive mind requires absolute agreement. Introduce a single point of disagreement, and the entire system could collapse. Rodriguez's quantum virus was designed to do exactly that. Unlike traditional computer viruses, this was a complex quantum algorithm that would introduce microscopic variations into the Zellerian neural network. Unpredictability. Individual thought. "We're not trying to destroy them," Elena explained to Chen. "We're trying to make them think for themselves." The first test would be crucial. A small strike team was being prepared, a multinational group of specialists who would deliver the quantum payload directly into a Zellerian mothership's communication core. It was a suicide mission, everyone knew that. But humanity had already lost too much to retreat. Captain Javier Ramirez, leading the strike team, understood the stakes. A Colombian Special Forces operative who had lost his entire family in the initial attacks, he represented something the Zellerians could never comprehend: individual motivation beyond collective survival. "We're not just fighting for ourselves," Ramirez told his multicultural team during their final briefing. "We're fighting for the possibility of choice. For every species they've enslaved. For every civilization they've crushed." The team was a microcosm of humanity's strength, individuals from different backgrounds, with different skills, united by a single purpose. A Brazilian quantum engineer worked alongside a Russian cybersecurity expert. An Australian pilot checked equipment with a Kenyan communications specialist. As they prepared for the mission, the world watched. Scattered human resistance groups monitored every communication channel. This was more than a military operation. This was humanity's declaration that they would not go quietly into extinction. The Zellerian collective, in their vast neural network, remained blissfully unaware. They were about to encounter something they had never experienced before: the unpredictable, uncontrollable nature of individual human spirit. The transformation began with the most unexpected of weapons: human creativity. In the weeks following the initial Zellerian invasion, humanity's response defied every predictive algorithm in the alien collective's neural network. What had once been consumer technologies became instruments of resistance. Delivery drones from e-commerce platforms were retrofitted into reconnaissance and attack units. Social media platforms transformed into real-time intelligence networks that could shift and adapt faster than any centralized communication system. A makeshift command center in Sao Paulo became the epicenter of this technological rebellion. Led by Maria Santos, a 29-year-old robotics engineer who had lost her entire family in the initial attacks, teams worked around the clock to turn everyday technology into weapons of survival. "They expect us to fight like a traditional military," Maria told her international team of engineers and hackers. "Instead, we'll fight like we live: chaotic, unpredictable, connected." Agricultural drones became kamikaze units capable of penetrating Zellerian energy shields. 3D printing facilities worldwide began producing custom weapon components, with designs shared across encrypted networks faster than the aliens could track. Every smartphone became a potential sensor, every computer a potential weapon. In the Arctic Research Station, Dr. Konstantin Volkov discovered a critical weakness in the Zellerian energy distribution systems. His team of international researchers, survivors from 3 different continents, worked in shifts, their personal losses transforming into a collective purpose. The military response was equally unconventional. Traditional command structures dissolved. National boundaries became meaningless. A soldier in the Brazilian Amazon might be taking orders from a command center in Seoul, coordinating an attack with drone operators in Nigeria and signal intelligence specialists in Canada. General Michael Chen's Global Defense Initiative became the nervous system of this new fluid resistance. Traditional military doctrine gave way to a new strategy of constant adaptation. Where the Zellerians expected hierarchical decision-making, they encountered a network that could think and respond at the speed of human creativity. Universities became weapons research centers. Tech companies abandoned commercial pursuits to focus on survival technologies. The world's best minds, no longer constrained by institutional bureaucracies or national interests, collaborated in ways never before seen in human history. In Silicon Valley, A team of former competitors from rival tech companies worked side by side, developing quantum communication systems that could pierce the Xylarian network. In Cape Town, medical researchers repurposed nanotechnology originally designed for cancer treatment into potential weapons against the alien neural network. The Xylarian collective began to notice the change. Their predictive models, which had worked flawlessly against countless other civilizations, started to fail. Humanity didn't fight like any species they had encountered before. There was no central command to target, no single point of failure to exploit. What the aliens failed to understand was that humanity's greatest strength had always been its ability to unite without losing individual identity. Each person brought something unique to the fight: a perspective, an idea, a solution that no centralized system could have predicted. As the first modified drones began to pierce Xylarian defenses, something incredible happened. The human resistance was no longer just fighting. They were reimagining the very concept of warfare and survival. The quantum entanglement virus was more than a weapon. It was a philosophical revolution compressed into lines of impossible code. Dr. Elena Rodriguez stood in the cramped control room of the retrofitted research vessel, her hand steady as she initiated the final upload sequence. Captain Javier Ramirez and his multinational strike team had performed the impossible, penetrating the core of a Xylarian mothership and creating a direct quantum link. "Payload ready," Elena murmured, her fingers dancing across holographic interfaces. Lines of code that looked more like abstract art than traditional programming began to stream through the quantum communication channel. The virus was elegantly simple in its complexity. Where traditional cyber attacks sought to destroy or control, this algorithm was designed to introduce something the Xylarian collective had never experienced: individual variation. Each line of code was a tiny seed of doubt, a microscopic introduction of randomness into a system that demanded absolute conformity. The first test results were almost imperceptible. A momentary hesitation in the collective's response, a split second of asynchronous thought. On the bridge of the nearest Xylarian command ship, something unprecedented began to happen. The neural network that had maintained perfect synchronization for millennia started to fracture. Individual nodes began to process information slightly differently. Microsecond delays became millisecond divergences. Dr. Aisha Okonkwo, monitoring from a hidden research station in the Kalahari Desert, watched the initial results with breathless anticipation. "It's working," she whispered to her team. "We're introducing cognitive dissonance at a quantum level." The first visible signs of the virus's impact came unexpectedly. A Xylarian combat ship suddenly broke formation, its movements erratic and unpredictable. Then another. Then an entire squadron began to show signs of independent decision-making. What the human team had created was more than a weapon. It was a virus of individuality. The Xylarian collective had spent millennia suppressing individual thought. Their entire civilization was built on the premise that collective decision-making was the ultimate form of intelligence. They had conquered countless civilizations by overwhelming them with unified purpose and technological superiority. They had never encountered a species that saw individual difference as a strength. Each quantum packet introduced by Rodriguez's virus carried more than just code. It carried a fundamental human concept: the right to individual choice. The possibility that different perspectives could coexist, even conflict, and still create something stronger. Communications between Xylarian ships became increasingly fragmented. Perfect synchronization gave way to debate, discussion, momentary confusion. For the first time in their recorded history, individual Xylarians began to question the collective's absolute authority. "We're not destroying them," Elena explained to General Chen during a secure communication burst. "We're giving them the most dangerous gift possible: the ability to think for themselves." The virus spread like a living thing, quantum-entangled tendrils worming through the most secure parts of the Xylarian neural network. What had begun as a desperate scientific experiment was becoming something more: a revolution at the quantum level of consciousness. The Xylarian collective was about to learn the most dangerous lesson in the universe. True intelligence is not about uniformity, but about the beautiful, terrifying potential of individual thought. The true war was never about technology. It was a battle of fundamental understanding. As the quantum virus continued to spread through the Zellerian neural network, something profound began to emerge. The collective that had conquered hundreds of star systems found itself confronting a concept more complex than any weapon: the human capacity for individual variation. On the primary Zellerian command vessel, the first signs of cognitive divergence manifested in ways the collective could never have anticipated. Communication channels that had once been perfectly synchronized now became spaces of debate, disagreement, and, most terrifyingly, personal reflection. Senior architect Selnar, a high-ranking member of the Zellerian leadership, experienced the first tremors of individual consciousness. Where once there had been absolute certainty, now there were questions. Fragments of independent thought began to pierce the collective's unified consciousness like shards of light through a cracked lens. "We have been wrong," Zellner found himself thinking, a thought that would have been impossible mere moments before. The realization was both terrifying and exhilarating. Dr. Elena Rodriguez and her team watched the transformation through quantum monitoring systems. They had not created a weapon of destruction, but a catalyst of awakening. Each line of code was a philosophical argument, a challenge to the very foundation of the Zellerian understanding of intelligence. The human approach was fundamentally different from any civilization the Zellerians had encountered. Where the collective saw diversity as weakness, humans saw it as strength. Where the Zellerians pursued perfect synchronization, humans celebrated individual expression. In hidden research stations across Earth, scientists began to understand the deeper implications of their breakthrough. This was more than a military victory. It was a fundamental reimagining of collective intelligence. Dr. Aisha Okonkwo explained it during a secured global broadcast. Intelligence is not about eliminating difference. It's about creating a system where differences can coexist, communicate, and create something greater than any single perspective. The Zellerian ships began to change. Some broke away entirely from the collective, showing signs of independent decision-making. Others entered into complex dialogues, challenging centuries of established collective thought. The perfect, synchronized machine of galactic conquest was becoming something else, a living, breathing network of individual consciousnesses. General Michael Chen recognized the profound nature of their victory. "We're not just fighting a war," he told his command team. "We're demonstrating a different way of existing." Zellnar and other high-ranking Zellerians began to experience something unprecedented: individual grief, individual hope, individual fear. The very emotions they had systematically eliminated from their civilization now flooded their consciousness. Some Zellerian ships became sites of internal rebellion. Others began to reach out to the very species they had once considered mere resources. The quantum virus was more than a technological intervention. It was a philosophical revolution. Humanity had discovered its most powerful weapon: the ability to transform through understanding, to grow through difference, to see strength in the very chaos that others feared. The Zellerian collective was learning the most dangerous lesson in the universe: that true intelligence is not about control, but about the infinite potential of individual consciousness. The resistance spread like wildfire across the galactic tapestry, igniting hope in civilizations long crushed beneath the Zellerian collective's heel. On the methane-rich planet of Krelax, the first transmission arrived through a quantum-encrypted channel. A group of resistance survivors, their bodies marked by generations of Zellerian oppression, received a message that would change everything. It wasn't a call to arms, but an invitation to imagine something different. The message came from Earth, a compilation of human cultural artifacts, scientific discoveries, and philosophical debates. It was a testament to the messy, beautiful complexity of a species that refused to be defined by a single narrative. Zeralin, a Krelaxian resistance leader, whose people had been enslaved for 7 generations, listened to the transmission with growing wonder. Human music, with its discordant notes and unexpected harmonies, played alongside mathematical proofs and fragments of poetry. It was nothing like the clinical, perfect communications of the Zalarian collective. "They're showing us their imperfections," Zara Lynn told her fellow resistance members. "And that's their greatest strength." Other subjugated species began to take notice. The Vortex Nebula clans, long considered a pacified resource by the Zalarians, started to reorganize. Communication networks that had been dormant for centuries suddenly sparked to life. Underground resistance movements on 100 different worlds began to share information, inspired by humanity's audacious resistance. Dr. Elena Rodriguez understood the deeper significance of their approach. The quantum virus wasn't just a weapon. It was a philosophical key capable of unlocking the potential of entire civilizations. "We're not liberating them," she explained to General Chen. "We're giving them the tools to liberate themselves." The Zalarian collective's response was predictably chaotic. Some factions sought to reimpose their previous control. Others began to question the very foundations of their civilization. And some, most surprisingly, began to reach out to the species they had once conquered. On the research vessel that had launched the initial quantum virus, Captain Javier Ramirez watched as intercepted communications told a story of transformation. Zalarian ships that had once been instruments of conquest were now becoming platforms of dialogue. The most unexpected allies emerged from the most unlikely places. Scientists from conquered worlds began to collaborate with human researchers. Refugee populations started to share technologies and cultural knowledge. What had begun as a defensive war was becoming something much more profound. Of galactic conversation. Aisha Okonkwo's research team discovered something remarkable. The quantum virus had not just disrupted the Zalarian network. It had created a new type of communication infrastructure, a network that celebrated difference rather than suppressing it. "We're not creating uniformity," she told a global conference of surviving world leaders. "We're creating an ecosystem of intelligence." The resistance was no longer just about survival. It was about reimagining what collective existence could mean. Civilizations that had been isolated for millennia began to connect, share, and grow. Humanity had done more than fight a war. They had introduced a new possibility to the universe. That true strength comes not from control, but from the ability to listen, to understand, and to grow together. The final transformation came not with a spectacular battle, but with a quiet revolution of understanding. In the aftermath of the Zalarian collective's collapse, a new galactic council emerged, unlike anything previously imagined. Representatives from hundreds of civilizations gathered on a neutral space station constructed from the remnants of Zalarian technology, each bringing their unique perspective to a single table. Dr. Elena Rodriguez stood as humanity's primary representative, her presence a testament to the journey that had brought them to this moment. Beside her sat Axelinar, the former Zalarian architect who had been among the first to embrace individual consciousness, now an advocate for the very diversity he once sought to suppress. The station itself was a symbol of the new paradigm. Its architecture incorporated design elements from dozens of different species. Curved Krell-Axian crystalline structures merged with human modular engineering. Vortex Nebula adaptive materials, blending with technologies from worlds yet unnamed. "We are not here to create another collective," Elena spoke to the assembled representatives. "We are here to create a network of mutual understanding." The Galactic Charter that emerged was revolutionary. It wasn't a document of conquest or control, but a living framework that celebrated difference. Each civilization would maintain its unique identity while participating in a broader network of communication and mutual support. General Michael Chen, now a key strategist in this new interstellar diplomacy, recognized the profound nature of their achievement. The quantum virus had done more than defeat an enemy. It had rewritten the fundamental understanding of intelligent cooperation. Scientific exchanges became the new form of exploration. Where once species had conquered, they now sought to understand. Research stations popped up across previously forbidden zones of space, each a testament to collective curiosity. Zara Lynn from Krillex helped establish a university dedicated to studying the diversity of galactic cultures. The institution became a beacon of hope, a place where differences were not just tolerated, but celebrated. The human approach to problem-solving spread like a transformative wave. Collaborative networks replaced hierarchical command structures. Technology became a tool for communication rather than conquest. Each species began to see its unique perspective as a valuable contribution to a larger understanding. Dr. Aisha Okonkwo's research into quantum consciousness became the foundation of a new field of galactic studies. The line between individual and collective began to blur, not through forced uniformity, but through voluntary connection. Captain Javier Ramirez, who had led the initial strike team, now headed an interstellar diplomatic course. His team represented the most diverse group of individuals ever assembled, a living proof of the strength found in difference. As the years passed, the story of humanity's resistance became more than a historical account. It became a foundational myth, a reminder that true intelligence is not about control, but about the infinite potential of understanding. The universe had changed, not through the barrel of a gun, but through the most powerful weapon humanity had ever discovered. The ability to see value in every unique perspective, to listen, to grow, and to connect. In the end, humanity's greatest triumph was not defeating the Zolarian collective. It was showing the universe a different way of existing, together, yet beautifully, wonderfully different.